This episode was originally released as a bonus episode of Real English Radio and is now being released to the public. Enjoy.
Have you ever heard of the 7-second rule? If you have to lead meetings or classes or anything that involves a group discussion, you'll want to know this. As a professor, I use this all the time, and somebody taught me a long time ago that if you're trying to get people to engage in a discussion or conversation or debate, you have to give them 7 seconds to think. Here's what that looks like. Let's say you need people to help you solve a problem, and you say, all right, everyone, how do we solve this problem? The 7-second rule is that after you ask that question, you just totally shut up for 7 seconds. You count it out in your head because it's going to be really awkward. There's this 7-second period of silence that nobody is used to. Most of the time, you're going to want to come in with, come on, people, what are your answers? How are we going to solve this at about the 3-second mark? Or if you're a teacher or a professor, you're going to say something like, if nobody answers, I'm going to start calling on people. Resist the urge to do both of those things. Just count out slowly in your head, 1, 1,000, 2, 1,000, all the way to 7. What that does is give people time to think, and it also gives them time to work up the courage to talk. You'd be amazed at how many people come in with their comments right at the 7-second mark. In the rare occasion when nobody comes in during that 7-second period, my favorite trick is to say that you're using the 7-second rule, and then explain that when you ask a question, you wait 7 seconds. And then sometimes I even count out loud, and definitely within that 7 seconds, somebody's going to pipe up with their comments or ideas or input. So if you're leading a meeting or a class or anything that involves group discussion, remember the 7-second rule. It works every time.
All right, my friend, you are listening to yet another episode of Real English Radio. I'm your host, Tony Kaizen, and today we're talking about the 7-second rule. It's funny that this video popped up on my TikTok feed a couple days ago, and it's as if TikTok knew what I was going through because this is something I experience on practically a daily basis at this point. But before we get into the actual rule and some practical applications and situations and stuff like that, as always, I'm going to go back to the beginning of this clip and break it down bit by bit just to make sure everything's clear. So give me a second. Let me go back to the beginning. All right, here we go.
Have you ever heard of the 7-second rule? If you have to lead meetings or classes or anything that involves a group discussion, you'll want to know this.
Okay, so the first word, lead. The word lead is both a noun and a verb, but in this case, it's being used as a verb. To lead a meeting or a class or a group of people just means to guide or direct the meeting, the class, or the group of people. So typically at some whatever company, let's call it Google, they're at the office and a manager or a team leader or somebody is going to lead the meeting. The person standing at the front of the room, giving instructions, teaching lessons, answering questions, making sure everybody's engaged, making sure everybody's on the same page. That is the leader. And the leader is the person who leads. Same thing in a classroom. The teacher is leading the class, teaching the lesson, answering questions. You get the idea. That's what it means to lead. So if you are somebody who leads meetings, classes, or anything that involves a group discussion, you need to know about the 7-second rule.
Discussion, you'll want to know this. As a professor, I use this all the time, and somebody taught me a long time ago that if you're trying to get people to engage in a discussion or conversation or debate, you have to give them 7 seconds to think.
All right, the next thing I want to explain, the phrase to get people to engage. He says, as a professor, I use this all the time, and somebody taught me a long time ago that if you're trying to get people to engage. Now, what I want to teach you is the phrase to get someone to do something. It's very common in spoken English. I don't know about other countries, but definitely American English. So it just means doing whatever's necessary in order for somebody else to do something that you want them to do. So I might get my brother to go to the store for me. And that could be any way. I could pay him money. I could just ask him to do it. I could blackmail him, whatever, in some way. Typically, it's not like a negative thing because there are more specific words like blackmail is a way of getting someone to do something, but that's unrelated. Let me stay on task. To get someone to do something, like I said, is doing whatever's necessary in order for this person to do what you want them to do. So to get people to engage It means to do whatever is necessary to cause this group of people to become engaged. Or if I get you to tell the truth, it means that for a long time you didn't want to tell the truth, but I somehow convince you to tell the truth. So in the past tense, I would say I got you to tell the truth. You see what I'm saying? Maybe your friend has been talking about learning to speak English for years, and finally, for some reason, you convince him to start learning English. You got him to start learning English. You see what I'm saying? It's a very, very common, very important phrase. It's very simple. It's not necessarily complicated, but it does take some practice if you don't speak that way in your native language. So let me play that part again.
A long time ago that if you're trying to get people to engage in a discussion or conversation or debate, you have to give them 7 seconds to think. Here's what that looks like. Let's say you need people to help you solve a problem, and you say, all right, everyone, how do we solve this problem? The 7-second rule is that after you ask that question, you just totally shut up for 7 seconds. You count it out in your head because it's going to be really awkward. There's this 7-second period of silence that nobody is used to.
All right. So that was a lot. I probably should have stopped it a bit earlier, but I'm going to go back to the first thing that he said. Give me 1 second.
Me a long time ago that if you're trying to get people to engage in a discussion or conversation or debate, you have to give them 7 seconds to think. Here's what that looks like.
Here's what that looks like. This is what I wanted to explain. When he says, here's what that looks like, you might understand that just based on the context. But what I want to point out is that it's a very, what's the word I would use, colloquial way of expressing the fact that you're about to illustrate your point. You're about to describe or give an example, and you want this person to imagine what it is you're describing. So again, he's saying if you're trying to get people to engage in a discussion, a conversation, a debate, you have to give them 7 seconds to think. Here's what that looks like. Another way of saying that is you have to give them 7 seconds, blah, blah, blah. Here's an example. Or imagine this. Something like that. You're just saying that I'm about to give you an example, so imagine this scenario or this situation. And then he goes on to describe it. He says, let's say you need help solving a problem, and you say, all right, how do we solve this problem? The 7-second rule is that after you ask that question, you just totally shut up or be silent, be quiet, stop talking, and then you count it out in your head because it's going to be very awkward. So to count something out, it means, well, in this case, in the context of time, it means to track the time. It's almost the same as counting. But when you count it out, it means that you have a set number and you count from the beginning to the end. So if you're going to give them 7 seconds, if you count out 7 seconds, you are counting from 1 to 7. You start at 1, you go all the way out to 7. You could just say count to 7. But when you say count it out, it's like putting more emphasis on the fact that you're probably going to say or deliberately focus on the fact that you're counting. Does that make sense to you? It's like the dictionary definition isn't much more helpful. Count it out, the phrase, to measure or keep track of a quantity, such as time, by counting incrementally. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. So if I say, give me 30 push-ups, get on the floor, drop to the floor, and give me 30 push-ups, which is the same thing as saying do 30 push-ups. And then you start doing push-ups and I say count them out. You're going to then go 1, 2, 3. You're counting them out. You're counting out the push-ups. Man, I hope that makes sense. Because it's not like the most important thing in the world, but it doesn't necessarily make literal sense if you're just reading it and you've never heard that before. But hopefully now it makes sense. You count out the 7 seconds because it's going to be very awkward. Now you've heard this word many times on the podcast, but just in case you've forgotten, the adjective awkward describes the feeling of discomfort, maybe even embarrassment. Just very uncomfortable, right? And we're talking about silence. For a lot of people, sitting in silence is very uncomfortable. It's very awkward. It's like you don't know what to do or how to act. It just feels strange. It feels strange. It's awkward, right? So that's why you have to count out in your head 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Because just sitting there in silence might be very uncomfortable for you. So by counting, it gives you something to focus on, and you're not focused on the silence, which is uncomfortable. I'm sure you get the point, all right? So let's continue.
Let's say you need people to help you solve a problem, and you say, all right, everyone, how do we solve this problem? The 7-second rule is that after you ask that question, you just totally shut up for 7 seconds. You count it out in your head because it's going to be really awkward. There's this 7-second period of silence that nobody is used to. Most of the time, you're going to want to come in with, come on, people, what are your answers? How are we going to solve this? At about the 3-second mark. Or if you're a teacher or a professor, you're going to say something like, if nobody answers, I'm going to start calling on people. Resist the urge to do both of those things.
All right. So again, he goes on to explain there's going to be this 7-second period or 7-second. There's not another way to say that, is there? Portion of time, 7-second period of silence that nobody is used to. I know a lot of y'all still struggle with the phrase used to because it is a little confusing at first, right? So when he says a moment of silence that nobody is used to, you can think of it like him saying a moment of silence that no one is accustomed to, that no one is familiar with, right? Because to be used to something means that you have experience with this thing or this activity or whatever. I'm used to the pollution in this city. It's like I've experienced it so many times or for so long that it's normal to me now. It's not something novel or different or strange or surprising, right? I'm used to spicy food. I eat it all the time. So it's not like a shock for me when I eat something that's spicy. I'm used to it. So there's going to be this 7-second period of time that no one is used to. Most people are not accustomed to waiting 7 seconds for somebody to respond, just waiting in silence. Most of us are not used to that. We're not accustomed to that, right? And then he says, most of the time, you're going to want to come in with blah, blah, blah. When he says come in with, when you hear that, you might think like enter the room. When you knock on the door, somebody says, yeah, come in. Come in. Like you can enter. But in this case, it's like figuratively. When you come in with something, it's like, how would I say that? Like entering a conversation or a situation. So again, back to the context. He asks a question. Okay, how are we going to solve this problem? Then there's silence. If he comes in with something, it means that he starts speaking again. Because imagine we're sitting in a circle and it's silent. There's nothing going on between us. If he comes in with a statement, it's like he goes into the middle of the circle and says something, just figuratively, not literally, right? So you might want to come in with, oh, come on, people, what are your answers? What, blah, blah, blah. And at about the 3-second mark or the 3-second point, once you arrive at 3 seconds or once you get to 3 seconds, you might say something like, if nobody answers, I'm going to start calling on people. And to call on somebody is like selecting somebody by saying their name. And you know what this is like, sitting in a classroom and the teacher asks a question. All the students are sitting there silently looking down, avoiding eye contact, doing everything they can not to be called on. And then the teacher says, you, Jason, what do you have to say? The teacher has just called on Jason. Because to call Jason, just so you can understand the difference, if I call Jason, that's more like I'm just calling his attention. I say, hey, Jason, I just want his attention for whatever reason. But if I call on Jason, then the context is a bit different. It's clear that I've asked a question or asked for something, and there's a group of people that I could select from. And then I select this one in particular. Jason, you, what do you have to say? Now I've called on Jason. I hope I'm making sense here. But again, if you have questions, if something's not clear, you can send me a message anytime. But let's move on. He then says, resist the urge to do both of those things. Resist the impulse or that natural desire to force people to speak just because you can't handle the silence. Resist the urge to call on somebody. Resist the urge to threaten people and say, if you don't answer, I'm going to start, resist the urge to do both of those things. Just count in your head slowly. 1, 1,000, 2, 1,000, 3, 1,000, all the way to 7. Now, I don't know if you guys do this in your language, but in the US, it is quite common for people to say 1, 1,000, 2, 1,000, 3, 1,000. And you might be thinking, why the fuck is he saying 1,000 like that? And I don't know the actual origin of this, but I've always understood that it's just a way of making sure that we actually let 1 second pass before we move on to the next one when we're counting time. Usually seconds, almost always seconds. Because if you say count to 10, some people might say 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. 10 seconds hasn't really passed, right? 10 seconds haven't passed. So to make sure that you're putting space between each number, we just say 1,000, because that's probably going to take more or less a second to say. 1, 1,000, 2, 1,000. And now I know there's space between 1 and 2. Does that make sense? So it's just a cultural detail. It's not really important, but maybe you were wondering why we say 1,000. And it's just because the word is long enough to make sure that we're actually giving a full second before we move on to the next number. So count it out in your head. 1, 1,000, 2, 1,000, 3, 1,000, blah, blah, blah. All right. Okay, I believe that was everything, my friend. Hopefully you're still with me. Let's get back to the clip. Here we go.
For a professor, you're going to say something like, if nobody answers, I'm going to start calling on people. Resist the urge to do both of those things. Just count out slowly in your head 1, 1,000, 2, 1,000, all the way to 7. What that does is give people time to think, and it also gives them time to work up the courage to talk. You'd be amazed at how many people come in with their comments right at the 7-second mark.
All right, so again, resist the urge to do both of those things that we just talked about. Count it out slowly, all the way to 7. And what this does is give people time to think, and it gives them time to work up the courage to talk. So to work up, in this case, describes the idea of something gradually developing or building to a particular point. So in this case, to work up the courage. Imagine you're sitting in class and you want to say something, but you're a little nervous. You're a little shy. You don't want to be the first one to speak. You don't want to be the one who says something stupid in front of everybody. So you just sit there, you're thinking about it. It's quiet, it's dead silent. All you can hear is your anxious thoughts. You want to speak, but it just takes some time. And then eventually you're just like, oh, fuck it, I'm just going to say it. And then you speak. You took a few seconds to work up the courage, or you'll also hear people say build up the courage. Same thing in this context. Work up the courage, build up the courage. Just means to take a bit of time to develop it, right? I had to work up the courage to go talk to that girl. It's like I wanted to. I had the urge, but I was nervous at first. And I had to build up the courage or work up the courage. Have that little pep talk. Come on, Tone. We talked about this, man. Not gonna be a little bitch. Just go over there and say hello, right? You have to work it up. Put in an effort to develop it. That emotional state or mindset or whatever it is. So it gives people time to work up the courage or the bravery to speak. And then he says, you'd be amazed at how many people come in, remember, in this case, come in with their comments. Not entering the room, but they enter the conversation or the discussion. You'd be amazed or you'd be surprised at how many people come in with their comments right at the 7-second mark. When he says right at, he just means exactly at. We often use the word right in reference to time when we mean exactly at that point. They come in right at the 7-second mark. As soon as he gets to 7, then people come in with their comments. I'm sure that makes sense to you. All right. All right. We got just a few more things I want to explain. So let me go back a couple seconds and we'll keep going.
To work up the courage to talk. You'd be amazed at how many people come in with their comments right at the 7-second mark. In the rare occasion when nobody comes in during that 7-second period, my favorite trick is to say that you're using the 7-second rule and then explain that when you ask a question, you wait 7 seconds. And then sometimes I even count out loud, and definitely within that 7 seconds, somebody's going to pipe up with their comments or ideas or input. So if you're leading a meeting or a class or anything that involves group discussion, remember the 7-second rule. It works every time.
Okay, so in the rare occasion or the uncommon occasion or moment when nobody comes in during that 7-second period, his favorite trick is to do blah, blah, blah. So the word trick probably sounds familiar to you, but just in case it doesn't, a trick is like a clever or smart way of doing something. This little hack or this little method, this little thing that you do to get the result that you're looking for. Does that make any kind of sense? Like a little trick? It's just like this little thing, this little smart thing that you do to get a particular result that you're looking for. Something that's most likely challenging And then you think creatively or abstractly to come up with a solution, an uncommon solution to a common problem. So his little trick for solving this problem of nobody coming in with comments or responses is to tell them that he's using the 7-second rule. He explains to them, I typically wait 7 seconds to see if anybody's going to come in with something. I want to give you guys time to think, build up the courage to speak. He lets them know what he's doing and why he's remaining silent after every question. And then sometimes he will even count out loud. Another useful phrase, out loud. To say something out loud means to say it in a way that can be heard by other people. So you can say something in your head, you're just thinking it, nobody can hear it, or you say something out loud. Right now, I am saying things out loud. I'm speaking to you. You can hear what I'm saying. So what I'm saying is being said out loud. If I tell you to count out loud, count so that I can hear you. If I say read out loud, it means don't read in your head, use your mouth and actually read the words so that I can hear you. You see? So he counts out loud, and definitely within 7 seconds, somebody's going to pipe up with their comments. Now, to pipe up, you're not going to hear every day. If you use it, you're going to sound like a very advanced English speaker, though. I can say that. To pipe up just means to make noise, to say something, but in a very sudden way, you know? It's similar to pop up. Like when you go on a website and then this random box pops up or randomly or suddenly appears on your screen. It's like that, but with speech. The same way if you're talking too much or too loud, somebody say, pipe down, bro. Pipe down. It means be quiet, stop talking, stop making so much noise. That's a very rude way of telling somebody to stop making noise, but with friends or your children or something, hey, pipe down, bro. Similar to saying, well, shut up, bro. You know what I'm saying? But to pipe up is like the opposite. It means to suddenly speak, make noise, say something, you know? So definitely within those 7 seconds, somebody's going to say something, give a comment or their input. That was the last thing he said. Now, input is another word for contributions. In this context, if somebody has input, it means they have information or an idea or an opinion or some feedback to contribute to the discussion. So let me just repeat that one more time. He says, sometimes I even count out loud, and definitely within 7 seconds, somebody's going to pipe up with their comments and or input, their feedback, their opinion, their idea, whatever. All right. Okay, my friends. Now I'm going to leave timestamps in the description for this episode. So if you want to go back and hear the entire clip again, uninterrupted, actually, you don't need timestamps for that. You just go back to 0 seconds, go right back to the beginning of the episode. You can listen to it all again. But in the interest of time and efficiency, my friend, we're going to move right on to the next part of this episode now that the explanations are done. So here are some things to consider in relation to this clip. As an English learner, you may not ever find yourself having to lead a meeting at work or teach a class full of students, but you will constantly find yourself in both one-on-one conversations and group discussions. So here are the main takeaways from this clip and how they can be applied in daily conversations. The first one, the importance of patience. Super underrated skill to have, because I do believe it's a skill. I think you have to learn how to be patient and practice patience. And this goes both ways, meaning that patience benefits both you and the person you're speaking to. Because when you're the listener in a conversation or a group discussion, a class, a meeting or whatever, being able to just remain silent and wait for the other person to respond gives you the chance to, how would I say this? It gives you, not even you, I'm saying that wrong. It gives them the chance to collect their thoughts. As he said in the video clip, I think this is a very underrated thing to do in a conversation, is to give the other person a few seconds or even a minute to gather their thoughts. Because like I said in a recent episode, many of us are very poor at expressing ourselves. And part of the reason for that is we think that we have to respond immediately. I think that's true even in our native language, but certainly when we're speaking a foreign language, we want to be able to have conversations, fluid, coherent, natural conversations with native speakers of that language. So when they say something to us, we think we must be able to respond instantly. Otherwise, we suck. And that's not true. Although the desire to have that ability is totally normal, and I think we all share that desire, I still think it's one of the things that causes us to express ourselves very poorly, because we don't do anything well when we're in a rush. We don't do anything well if we're rushing. We do things best when we take our time. Some people move faster than others, think faster than others, but still, rushing is relative. So whatever's rushing for you, whatever's too fast for you, you're not going to be doing things well if that's the case. So if you're the listener, giving the other person time to gather their thoughts, take their time to formulate a response, you're going to hear better responses. And on the flip side, like I said, it goes both ways. On the flip side, giving yourself time to respond, you will give better responses. You know? And also, just like apart from whether the response is good or not, just showing people the respect they deserve. Because I'm one of the people that believes to listen, to pay attention, is to respect. And you can probably see that in your daily life. Like, you don't listen to or pay attention to people you don't respect. Like when your boss is talking in a meeting, you shut the fuck up and listen because you respect your boss. You know that there's going to be consequences for not listening attentively. You don't want your boss to think lowly of you. You want your boss to think highly of you. So you maintain eye contact, you nod and you respond and you engage. But if it's just some random stranger on the street or some ugly motherfucker asking for your number, you know what I'm saying? You're not going to show the same level of respect. You're not going to be paying attention or reciprocating the energy or listening attentively. You only do that with people you respect. People whose words you value and want to hear. And obviously this is a very generalized statement, but I just think if you don't have that level of respect, why are we even talking if that's the case? If you're not genuinely interested in what the person has to say, if you're not willing to show them the patience and respect to give them enough time to like think and respond intelligently, why are we even having the conversation? Again, I know it's a generalized statement because like if you're at the grocery store and you're talking to the cashier, you're not going to have some deep meaning of life type conversation. There's other people in line, get the fuck on, bro. You're not the only person with places to be, man. Get the fuck out of here. But you know what I mean. A deeper, more like you're at a cafe or at your friend's house or on a bus. You have time to go deeper into a conversation. Like, I think it's better if you show that patience and respect. Give people the time they need to express what they really want to express. And also, like, the other thing about that is when you make a habit of being quiet, asking a question that only the person you're talking to can answer, and just being quiet. Like I said a second ago, you actually hear better responses. And you also, I find like sometimes when you're talking to somebody, you ask a question and you don't really want to know the answer. You're just being polite or making small talk, trying to move the conversation along. I think when you take that pause, you take that moment to pause, I should say, you also give yourself and your mind enough time to quiet down and focus 100% on the person you're talking to. Because what often happens is we'll ask a question and we're already thinking about what we're going to say next. Or we're already trying to assume how they're going to finish their sentence or how they might respond. Thinking about everything except what they're about to say. Or what they're saying is what I mean. You know what I'm talking about? You'll ask a question and then even try to answer it for them. Or if there's a moment of silence while they're thinking, you'll try to come in with a joke or another comment or another question. And it's just, bro, shut up. Just be quiet. Calm your mind enough to and put 100% of your focus on them. Because even if they're not speaking, their body language will communicate things. How long it takes them to respond communicates something. The tone of their voice when they finally do speak. The movement of their eyes. Everything. There's so many things that tell you more about what they really mean to say. By giving yourself a few seconds to calm down, shut up, and pay attention, you'll notice these things. You can't do that if you're just always on go, 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 and not really thinking about what's being said and heard. Does that make sense? The other benefit of this 7-second rule is confidence. This is a huge one. Because, like I said a second ago, giving yourself time to think before you respond not only improves the quality of your responses, but you also start training yourself to be comfortable with the idea of making other people wait while you think of what you really need to say. Because if you feel like you need to be in a rush and just say something so the other person isn't waiting, you're probably going to say shit that you don't really mean, or you're going to say shit that isn't clear enough to express what you really mean. And that's enough to keep a conversation very shallow, or to keep it from going anywhere in particular, to keep the other person from understanding you on a deeper level. It's just like there's no point in that. So giving yourself the time and respect to stop and pause, look inward, and figure out what do you really want to say, you start to develop a level of confidence when speaking with people. You know it's okay if you don't have an answer immediately. You know it's okay if the other person has to wait 6 or 7 seconds before you respond. It's no big deal. And you'll see it's not a big deal once you start giving people 7 seconds. You're really not bothered by having to wait 5 to 7 seconds for a response. So the person you're talking to most likely won't be bothered either. So stop thinking about them, how they're going to take your words and how long they're waiting and if they're bored or whatever. No, stop and think to yourself, how do I want to respond to that? What do I really think about that? Or how do I really feel? You know? And it does take confidence to do that, but by practicing this 7-second rule, taking time, counting out in your head if necessary, breaking eye contact, looking away so you can focus. If you can start doing this before you respond, I guarantee you'll feel more confident when speaking, because you will have given yourself time to think about what you really want to say. And if you know truly what you really want to say, you'll have much more confidence when saying it. Speaking from experience, I don't know how you're going to feel or what you'll experience. I'm speaking from my own experience, you know? And another important thing to consider is the importance of being able to adapt to different communication styles. Because I think I said in a recent episode, everybody knows something you don't. Everybody's done something you haven't. And not only that, but everybody communicates in a way that's different from your communication style. Because maybe you come from a culture or a friend group or a family where it's very common. It's just bam, 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 bam. You say something, I say something. You say something, I say something. And we're not going deep or anything like that, or we're just thinking so quickly that the conversation moves at a very fast pace. But then you come across somebody from a completely different cultural background, or maybe you're extroverted and you come across an introvert. And you're like, why is this person so despondent? Why isn't this person engaging? What's wrong? Do they not like me? Are they bored? You might assume all these negative things when you just haven't considered they need more time to think than you do. You can have a fantastic conversation, but you just need to adapt to their conversation style so they feel comfortable speaking with you. Does that make sense? Same thing if you're an introvert. Same exact thing. It goes both ways. Maybe you're used to slower paced, deeper, more thought-provoking conversations, or you're just used to taking more time to think or whatever it may be. You also need to be able to adapt to a quicker, fast-paced conversation style. It's not just black and white. It's gray. That's why I'm always talking about communication and the importance of being able to talk to many different people, have many different kinds of conversations, because it's going to happen sooner or later. So you got to practice this stuff. And the 7-second rule is just one thing you can practice in order to become a better communicator. And the last thing I'll say about this rule, or the last thing I'll suggest, is that you try to remember the difference between waiting and hesitating. It's very important, because waiting 7 seconds to gather your thoughts and then speak is fantastic. Waiting 7 seconds for somebody else to gather their thoughts before they speak, fantastic. But let's go back to the classroom example, because I feel like this is universal. There will be times in my Thai classes right now, there will be times when actually this happens every day. There's not sometimes. Every day my teacher will be teaching some particular word or phrase or cultural aspect or whatever it may be. And then the teacher asks a question. or ask somebody to use this word in a complete sentence or something like that. And every single time she just sits there in silence. And at first, I was thinking to myself, like, why like, clearly nobody has anything to say. Can we please just fucking move on? Can we please move on? Why is she doing this every single time? And now I understand. I don't know if she thinks about it this way, but this is an example of her using the 7-second rule, even if she doesn't think about it this way. And almost every time, 6, 7, 8 seconds go by, and then somebody says something. Even me sometimes. I need a few seconds to gather my thoughts or construct the sentence. Then I come in with my sentence or my question or whatever. And all that is great. Fantastic. But sometimes what happens is those 7 seconds go by, and even though one or two of us have something that we would like to say, we're not waiting anymore. We're just hesitating. We've taken our time to think about it. And now we know what we want to say, but it's been silent for so long that now we don't want to speak up. We don't want to break that silence. So we're not waiting anymore. We're hesitating. And so that's what I want you to, or I suggest that you try to remember that. Is sometimes you'll take that 7 seconds to think about what you want to say, but then you just keep thinking and thinking and thinking and thinking, and you never speak. It's common in all aspects of life, right? Like, we know what we want to do or what we want to say, but we're just hesitating because we're afraid to then take the action. It's just easier to keep thinking and thinking and thinking. What if I say it wrong? What if I do it wrong? What if I look stupid? What if I sound silly? We hesitate. And if we get in the habit of hesitating, then we just get in the habit of thinking and never taking action. And that is the danger that I'm trying to warn you about. Nothing wrong with taking time to think, but just try your best to remember there's a difference between waiting and hesitating. And if you get in the habit of hesitating, there's very little chance you're going to get the confidence that you wish you had in order to speak this language and speak to anyone at any time. So what I'm asking you to do is recognize those moments when you're not waiting, but you're hesitating. And I don't know how you're going to do this, but I suggest you find a way to become cognizant or to become aware of the fact that you're hesitating, and then consciously say to yourself, okay, enough thinking, time to act. And say whatever it is you got to say, no matter how it comes out, or do whatever it is you got to do, no matter how it looks. You got to take action, bro. You cannot train yourself to hesitate. Nothing wrong with thinking, but there is something wrong with hesitating. In this context, all right? I'm not talking about life in general, but definitely when having conversations, trying to speak English, right? You get the point. So that's the last thing I wanted to leave you with, my friend. Let me know your thoughts on this, though. I really appreciate when y'all engage, when you leave your thoughts about the episodes, your perspective on these topics and things like that. So let me know what y'all think about the 7-second rule and your experience with it. And maybe things that you find yourself hesitating about, or moments when you feel shy to speak English, or other things that keep you from speaking, even when you know what you have to say. Stuff like that. Just let me know your thoughts on this episode in general. All right, my friend, but I'm going to get out of here, man. That is it for this episode of Real English Radio. I am your host, Tony Kaizen, and I'll talk to you soon. Peace.